An old man walked into Westbrook Bank on a cold Tuesday morning. His clothes were worn thin, his shoes held together with duct tape, and his coat had patches from decades of careful mending. The bank tellers looked up briefly before returning to their work, their eyes already dismissing him as just another pensioner coming to check his meager balance. But this Tuesday morning would change everything. As he shuffled toward the counter, he spoke words that would echo through the entire building and teach everyone a lesson about assumptions and hidden truths. "I only need to withdraw $10. His voice was soft, almost apologetic, like someone used to taking up less space in the world. That simple sentence would soon become the catalyst for the most shocking discovery in Westbrook Bank's 50-year history. Before we dive into this incredible story, if you love tales of hidden justice and unexpected triumphs, hit that subscribe button right now so you don't miss our next amazing stories. #, #, the bank and the Tuesday morning. Westbrook Bank sat on Main Street like it had for half a century, its marble columns and polished floors designed to intimidate common people. The building whispered authority with every architectural choice. Tall ceilings made you feel small. Expensive artwork suggested wealth beyond measure. Even the air smelled like money and privilege, a carefully curated atmosphere meant to remind visitors of their financial insignificance. Sarah Mitchell had worked there for 8 years. She was 28 years old, ambitious, and convinced that the path to management meant treating poor customers with barely concealed contempt. Her brown hair was always perfectly styled, her nails always manicured, her suit always pressed. She represented a particular type of young professional, the kind who believed that financial success measured human worth. Sarah had learned this lesson from her manager, Derek, who openly mocked customers with small accounts and questioned why the bank even bothered serving anyone below a certain income threshold. The bank's customer service metrics were harsh and unforgiving. Tellers were judged not by kindness or helpfulness, but by transaction speed and average account balance of customers they served. Sarah consistently ranked near the bottom because she didn't hide her impatience with elderly customers or people who came in to deposit coins or withdraw small amounts of money. The old man's entrance. The automatic doors slid open at 9:47 a.m. An old man entered, and the temperature of the entire bank seemed to drop. Not because of the winter wind trailing behind him, but because of the collective judgment that materialized in the glances of every employee. His name was Henry Charles, and he was 73 years old. His shoes were Walmart brand from at least a decade ago, the leather cracked and faded to a grayish brown. His coat was a heavy wool thing that had probably been fashionable sometime during the Clinton administration. The fabric was worn smooth in places from years of use. His hands trembled slightly as he walked, not from fear but from the arthritis that had gradually stolen his mobility over the past 15 years. His weathered face told stories of outdoor work, of honest labor, of a life lived without shortcuts or compromises. Deep lines carved his forehead and surrounded his eyes like a map of difficult decades. Behind him shuffled his grandson, Tommy, who was 8 years old and dressed in clothes just as worn. Tommy clutched a small backpack, his dark eyes wide as he took in the imposing marble halls of the bank. He'd never been here before. Most children his age hadn't needed to visit banks. Henry approached the counter where Sarah sat scrolling through her phone between customers. She didn't look up immediately. When she finally did, her expression shifted slightly, a barely perceptible curl of the lip that Henry had learned to recognize decades ago. It was the look of someone performing invisible calculations about social class and worthiness. #, the fateful request. "Good morning," Henry said, his voice soft but clear. "I need to make a withdrawal." Sarah's fingers continued moving across her computer keyboard without enthusiasm. "How much?" she asked, her tone suggesting she'd rather be doing anything else. $10, Henry replied. The words hung in the air like a bad smell. Sarah's eyebrows rose slightly, and then something that might have been a smirk tugged at the corners of her mouth. She glanced at her colleague, Marcus, who was processing a large transaction for a wealthy-looking businessman. The contrast was immediate and humiliating. $10, Sarah repeated, her tone dripping with barely concealed amusement. You came all the way into the bank for $10? She looked down at Tommy, then back to Henry with an expression that suggested pity mixed with contempt. There's an ATM outside. You could have saved yourself the trip. Heat flushed Henry's face, but he maintained his dignity. He'd faced worse than a smirking bank teller. He'd faced discrimination, poverty, illness, and loss. A dismissive young woman was nothing new, just another small humiliation in a life that had contained many. "I need to speak with someone about my account," Henry said quietly. Sarah rolled her eyes, an exaggerated gesture meant to communicate just how inconvenient this moment was for her important day. She typed his account number into her computer, a number written on a deposit slip he'd pulled from his pocket, and pressed enter. The screen refreshed, and Sarah's expression changed instantly. Her smirk vanished. Her face went pale. Her fingers froze above the keyboard. Behind her, you could almost hear the sound of her carefully constructed worldview cracking. ##### the unraveling. Sarah's eyes darted back to the screen, then to Henry, then back to the screen. She blinked several times, as if vision problems might explain what she was seeing. Her mouth opened and closed without producing sound. The professional mask she wore, the one that took years to perfect, had shattered completely. I need a moment," she stammered, standing up so quickly her chair rolled backward and crashed into the desk behind her. Heads turned throughout the bank. She walked directly to Derek's office without explaining to Henry, leaving him standing at the counter with Tommy. The boy tugged on Henry's coat. "Grandpa, what's happening? Why did the lady look scared?" Henry smiled gently and patted his grandson's head. "Sometimes people learn things that surprise them, Tommy. That's all." Inside Derek's office, doors closed but voices carried through the thin walls. Sarah was speaking rapidly, her voice high and strained. "I don't understand. It has to be a mistake. There's no way that old man has. That's impossible." Derek emerged from his office moments later. He was a man in his 50s, expensive suit, expensive watch, the kind of person who made decisions based on what could be extracted from people rather than what could be given to them. He approached the counter slowly, studying Henry like an archaeologist examining an unexpected artifact. "Mr. Charles," he said, his tone transformed from the usual bank manager indifference to something resembling respect. "I apologize for the confusion. Please, allow me to assist you personally. Would you perhaps like to step into my office? It's more private there." Henry looked at his grandson, then back at Derek. "I'm fine here. I just need to withdraw $10. Derek's smile became strained. "Of course." Sarah was simply surprised. "Your account is quite substantial, and we noticed it's been with us for quite some time. We'd very much like to discuss wealth management services that might benefit you." The irony wasn't lost on anyone listening. Minutes ago, Sarah couldn't hide her contempt for this man. Now Derek was speaking about wealth management like Henry was some kind of celebrity client. #### the revelation spreads. Word traveled through the bank like electricity through copper wiring. Tellers whispered to each other while maintaining professional facades. The manager who'd been counting his own money while dismissing customer problems suddenly became deeply focused on customer service protocols. Even the security guard, who'd been watching Henry with the subtle suspicion banks reserved for poor people, straightened his posture and looked away embarrassed. Henry pulled out his deposit slip. The account had been opened in 1987, 36 years ago. That was before Sarah was born. That was when Henry was still working full-time as a machine operator at the automotive plant before arthritis had stolen his career and forced early retirement. For 3 decades and 6 years, Henry had been depositing money into this account. Not huge amounts, he couldn't afford that, but consistent amounts. $20 one month, $50 the next month, $100 when he'd had a good month. Every deposit was made in person, always at the same bank, always with the same quiet dignity that never demanded recognition. The total? $4,873,622.47. #### the mathematics of quiet discipline. Later, when the story leaked to the local news, financial experts would calculate the implications. $4.8 million accumulated over 36 years meant an average of roughly $133,000 per year in deposits. That wasn't inheritance money or lottery winnings. That was earned money, saved money, money that represented a man choosing not to spend on himself, so he could secure something larger than his own immediate comfort. A journalist from the local newspaper, Carol Reynolds, would later interview Henry and try to understand the mathematics of his sacrifice. "How?" she asked simply. "How did you save so much when you were working as a machine operator?" Henry's answer was simple and devastating in its honesty. "I never had much, Miss Reynolds. But I had a choice about what to do with what I had. I chose to build something instead of spend it away. I worked overtime whenever I could. I fixed things instead of replacing them. I grew vegetables instead of buying them. I stopped going to restaurants 40 years ago. I haven't bought new clothes in 15 years. He gestured to his grandson. Everything I did was for him and for his future. I wanted him to have choices I never had. The interviewer asked the question everyone wanted to know. Why did you keep it secret? Why not invest it? Why not buy a better house or take care of yourself better? Henry smiled sadly. Because money talks, Miss Reynolds. When people know you have money, they start treating you different. They see you as an opportunity instead of a person. I didn't want that. I just wanted to be Henry Charles, the old man who lived quiet and worked hard. I wanted my grandson to grow up knowing that humble people can do extraordinary things when they're disciplined. Hashtag the bank's corporate crisis. While Henry spoke to journalists, Westbrook Bank's corporate office was having a very different conversation. Sarah's treatment of him was now being viewed through a completely different lens. The bank's legal team was already calculating potential liability. A high-net-worth customer treating with contempt by employees? That wasn't just bad customer service. That was potential grounds for discrimination lawsuits. Derek called an emergency meeting with the entire branch staff. His previously comfortable demeanor had been replaced with barely contained panic. What happened here was unacceptable, he announced, his eyes fixed on Sarah. We have protocols for treating all customers with respect, regardless of circumstances. But Derek's indignation rang hollow. Everyone knew that he'd built a culture where such treatment was encouraged. The problem wasn't Sarah's behavior. It was the system that had trained her to behave that way. Hashtag Sarah's reckoning. Sarah sat in Derek's office facing a different kind of interview. This one wasn't friendly. The bank's HR department was involved. Questions were being asked about whether her conduct constituted discrimination, whether it violated the bank's customer service standards, whether it represented a hostile environment for customers based on perceived economic status. Sarah's defense was weak and unconvincing. I didn't know he had money, she said, her voice small and ashamed. That's precisely the problem, the HR representative replied. Your behavior shouldn't change based on account balance. You treated him disrespectfully because you made assumptions about his worth based on his appearance. That's not how we operate at Westbrook Bank. At least, it's not how we're supposed to operate. Sarah received a formal written warning and was required to undergo customer service retraining. She would keep her job. The bank couldn't fire her without raising more legal questions. But her path to management had just become significantly more complicated. The experience created a strange feeling in Sarah that she'd never experienced before. It wasn't shame exactly, though there was some of that. It was more like watching the structure of her understanding about the world crack open and reveal something she'd been trying not to see. That financial success and personal worth weren't always visible on the surface. That kindness mattered more than she'd been taught to believe. That the old man in the worn coat was more than his appearance suggested. Hashtag the moment of justice. 1 week after withdrawing his $10, Henry returned to the bank. This time, Derek himself was waiting at the door, greeting him with the kind of deference usually reserved for major corporate clients. News of Henry's account had spread throughout the regional banking system. Corporate offices were now involved. Questions were being asked about why Westbrook Bank didn't have better systems for identifying high-net-worth customers who might need specialized services. Henry found the attention overwhelming and uncomfortable. He'd never wanted to be noticed. He'd built his fortune specifically to avoid being noticed, to live quietly and build something meaningful without the complications that came with being seen as wealthy. But the bank couldn't let this go. Henry represented a liability, a customer who'd been mistreated despite significant financial resources. He also represented an opportunity. The story of an elderly man accumulating nearly $5 million through quiet discipline was becoming a local celebrity narrative. The bank wanted to be associated with that success rather than with the employee who'd dismissed him. Derek offered Henry a personal banker, a dedicated professional who would handle all his financial needs. He offered expanded services usually reserved for clients with much higher account balances. He offered apologies from management, from corporate, from people Henry had never met. Henry accepted the personal banker, a woman named Patricia Chun, who seemed genuinely interested in understanding his story rather than extracting value from it. But he declined most of the expansive services. I don't need much, he told Patricia simply. I've lived this long without complicated investments. I'm too old to start changing now. Patricia respected his simplicity. Over the following weeks, they would develop a professional relationship based on mutual respect. Patricia would help Henry create a college fund for his grandson, structured in such a way that the money would be available when Tommy was old enough for university. The interest accumulated on Henry's account meant he could provide for his grandson's entire education without depleting the primary account. ####the media explosion. The story of Henry Charles hit the local news, and then the regional news, and then the national news. It was the kind of human interest story that people needed to hear, a reminder that invisible people sometimes carried invisible treasures. That discipline and sacrifice could compound into something extraordinary. That worth couldn't be measured by appearances. News anchors interviewed Henry. Journalists wrote profiles. Social media exploded with reactions ranging from inspiration to anger at Sarah's behavior to gratitude for the lesson about assumptions. #Henry Charles began trending on Twitter. People shared their own stories of being underestimated or dismissed because of their appearance. The most powerful moment came during a television interview when the reporter asked Henry directly about Sarah's treatment of him. "Do you hold any resentment toward her?" the reporter asked, expecting perhaps anger or bitterness. Henry considered the question carefully. "No," he said finally. "She's young. She's been taught by her culture to measure people by things that don't matter. That's not her fault alone. That's all of us. We need to be better about seeing past surfaces. She made a mistake, but it was a mistake born from ignorance, not malice." The interviewer looked surprised. "You're forgiving very easily." "I'm not forgiving or not forgiving," Henry replied. "I'm just understanding. She didn't hurt me. She just reminded me that most people need reminders about kindness. I'm happy to provide that reminder if it helps her become better at seeing people." ###the transformations. Sarah underwent genuine change as a result of the experience. The written warning remained on her record, but more importantly, her perspective fundamentally shifted. She began noticing the small ways she'd been trained to dismiss people. She listened differently to customers. She stopped assuming that appearance predicted worth. 3 months after the incident, she requested a transfer to the bank's community lending department, which helped people with limited credit histories get small business loans. The work was meaningful in ways her previous position had never been. She helped a single mother open a cleaning business. She helped an elderly man refinance his auto repair shop. She helped people build something instead of treating them as transactions to be rushed through. Derek also underwent transformation, though his was more institutional. He implemented new training protocols designed to eliminate the customer-shaming culture that had developed under his management. He created a policy where all employees received annual bonuses based partially on customer service ratings from people across all account balance categories. The result was a workplace where poor customers and wealthy customers received identical treatment and respect. The bank's corporate office used Henry's story in national advertising campaigns. "Everyone has a story" became the new tagline for Westbrook Bank's customer service philosophy. The irony was sharp. The same institution that had trained Sarah to dismiss Henry was now using his story to rebrand its image. But the results were genuine. Customer satisfaction increased across all demographics. Employee morale improved. The bank became known as a place that treated people with respect regardless of their financial status. #Henry's legacy. Henry used his sudden fame to advocate for financial literacy education in schools. He gave talks to student groups about the power of compound interest and delayed gratification. He spoke to young people about how discipline applied consistently over time could create possibilities they couldn't imagine. "When you're young, 30 years seems impossible," he told groups of high school and college students. "You think about next month, maybe next year. But if you plant seeds now, if you make small deposits into your future, not just financial deposits, but deposits of time, energy, learning, by the time you're my age, you'll have created something magnificent." His most powerful speeches were reserved for communities struggling with poverty. He spoke in neighborhood centers, at community colleges, in church basements. He spoke without condescension about the choices he'd made, the sacrifices he'd accepted. "The system is harder for poor people," he acknowledged frankly. "That's just truth. You have to work harder for less money. You have fewer options. But within those constraints, you still have choices about how to spend what you have. No one can take that away from you. Your discipline is yours to control." ###the changed lives. Sarah Mitchell would eventually become a loan officer specializing in community lending. She'd receive training and certifications that positioned her for management, but management of a different kind. She'd manage a team focused on helping people rather than extracting value from them. She'd think often of Henry's grace in forgiving her contempt, and she'd try to extend that same grace to people she encountered who were still operating from the old framework of assumptions and judgment. Derek would eventually retire 3 years early, moving to a small town where he opened a local bookstore. His corporate career had been comfortable but hollow. Working in Henry's story had reminded him of what mattered. In his retirement, he read voraciously and engaged with the community in ways that felt genuine. He wasn't a changed man exactly. Some things were too deeply embedded, but he was a man moving in the direction of change. The bank itself would prosper in ways that extended beyond financial metrics. Westbrook Bank became known throughout the region as an institution that treated people well. Customer loyalty increased. Employees wanted to work there. The community valued its presence in a way that transcended banking services. That was the real profit that Henry Charles had generated, not for himself, but for everyone he'd touched through his quiet presence. ###the deeper lesson. The story of Henry Charles and Sarah Mitchell teaches us something essential about modern life. We live in a culture that has become increasingly skilled at making judgments based on surface-level information. We see a worn coat and make conclusions about the person wearing it. We see a wrinkled face and assume we understand the nature of someone's life. We see tattered shoes and forget that the feet inside them might be walking a path we couldn't begin to understand. But this story also teaches that change is possible. That people like Sarah can recognize their errors and grow beyond them. That systems like the bank can shift from extracting value to creating value. That an old man with almost nothing visible can teach everyone around him something about what really matters. Henry never set out to teach this lesson. He never expected to become famous or to change a bank's culture or to be interviewed on national television. He just lived according to his values: quiet discipline, consistent sacrifice, unconditional love for his grandson. The visibility was thrust upon him by accident. But once he became visible, he used that visibility wisely. He could have been bitter about Sarah's treatment. He could have used his newfound fame to humiliate her publicly. Instead, he showed a kind of grace that made everyone who encountered his story want to be better. The final act. On a quiet evening, about 6 months after the bank incident, Henry and his grandson Tommy sat together in their small apartment. Tommy was doing his homework at the kitchen table, working on a math assignment about percentages and compound interest. Henry smiled at the cosmic synchronicity of it. "Grandpa," Tommy asked, "can I ask you something?" "Always, son. Why did you save so much money? You never spent anything on yourself. You always looked sad when you looked at your shoes." Henry sat across from his grandson, his weathered hands folded on the table. "I didn't save money to make you happy with things, Tommy. Things don't last. But education lasts. Knowledge lasts. Opportunity lasts. I wanted you to have a chance to become whoever you wanted to become. That's the most valuable thing anyone can receive." Tommy nodded, not fully understanding yet, but understanding enough. Someday, when he was older, he would understand completely. He would recognize that his grandfather's discipline had been an act of love. That every worn-out shoe, every meal of homegrown vegetables, every evening spent studying instead of buying entertainment had been an investment in his future. And if Tommy was wise, he would pass that lesson to his own children someday. He would understand that the greatest legacies aren't measured in individual transactions, but in values passed down through generations. That an old man withdrawing $10 from a bank could inadvertently teach millions of people something about character, discipline, and the invisible worth that lives inside all of us. #direct hit final message. The story of Henry Charles reminds us that everyone deserves respect, regardless of their appearance or visible financial status. It teaches us that discipline applied consistently over time creates miracles. It shows us that grace and forgiveness are more powerful than anger and judgment. Most importantly, it reminds us that the people around us, the janitors, the maintenance workers, the old people in worn coats, might be carrying invisible wealth that has nothing to do with money. They might be carrying wisdom, strength, discipline, and love that could teach us everything if we just took a moment to truly see them. If this story moved you, if it made you think differently about the assumptions you make about people, Then please like this video and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next incredible story of justice, transformation, and human dignity. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes the most important lessons come from the most unexpected places. The world needs more people like Henry Charles, people who lead quiet lives of integrity. And the world needs people like Sarah Mitchell, people who are willing to see their mistakes, learn from them, and become better. We all have the capacity to be both kinds of people. The question is which version of ourselves we're going to choose to be. Thank you for watching. Until next time, remember to see people. Really see them, not just the surfaces they present to the world.